Welcome back to the Play by Play podcast YouTube channel, where the heavyweight division in boxing has now just gotten a whole lot interesting. Following Tyson Fury's dominant performance against Arslanbek Makhmudov over on Saturday, over on Netflix, it was a pretty incredible event from a marketing standpoint, production standpoint. Now, from a boxing standpoint, it was definitely a little bit underwhelming, especially with the co-main event between Conor Benn and Regis Prograis, which is a whole nother topic for a whole nother video. But today, we want to focus mostly on Tyson Fury, because that was the basis of this event, was to bring Fury back into action, back into the boxing ring after almost 2 years out of the ring, following his 2 losses to Alexander Usyk, and warming him up for an eventual face-off against Anthony Joshua, which is potentially being lined up for around November to December of this year. And we had an interaction between the two towards the end of the fight, which we'll also talk about a little bit more towards the end of this video. But first, let's talk about Fury's performance itself and really how this does position him into a fight with Anthony Joshua. Because like I said, the fight as a whole was a little bit underwhelming, and I feel like from both sides of the aisle, we've gotten really some conflicting reports and analysis and opinions of this. There are some people that were in love with Fury's performance, that felt that he overperformed their expectations in what he was going to do. And while he did show like he had taken a little bit of a step back, he overall, once again, like I just mentioned, overperformed expectations and looked about as good as you believed he could look coming off of a 2-month layoff. There are other people saying that they were very disappointed with Tyson Fury's performance against Makhmudov, that felt that it was very, very underwhelming, that felt that he should have finished Makhmudov within those 12 rounds. And honestly, when looking at the fight itself and the scope, I think that there are some truth to both sides of that. I do think that Tyson Fury looked much better than I expected him to look. I thought that he was going to look much slower than he did in this fight. I thought that it was going to take him almost half of the fight to really warm up and get into things before he really started to put things on to Makhmudov. It realistically only took him about 3 to 4 rounds before he was in full big-time control. And I do think that we do have to understand that Tyson Fury has never been a big-time power puncher, even within the heavyweight division. He has never been the one who has been promising in terms of dominant finishes within, 4 to 6 rounds, like it was the expectance within this fight. I mean, you look at it, sure, he had finishes against Chisora and Dillian Whyte, but those were both guys that were purely past their prime and that were big-time mismatches when it came to that fight in terms of where Fury was at within his career with his speed and whatnot. Fury could not finish Francis Ngannou in what was a very, very competitive fight. He didn't finish Vladimir Klitschko the same way that Anthony Joshua was able to put it on Klitschko. And really, when you look at the course of Fury's career, there haven't been a lot of dominant big-time finishes. I mean, of course, both of the Deontay Wilder finishes were big, and I'm not trying to take away anything from Fury's career as a whole. But we do know that Wilder is not one of the best pure boxers within the heavyweight division, and that he does have a lot of major defensive weaknesses. And so going even prior to that, the last big-time finish from Tyson Fury had to be the ones against Steve Cunningham, who had his best days down at cruiserweight. So it was a much, much smaller heavyweight guy for Fury to go ahead and face off against. So I don't think that there should have been this massive expectation for Fury to finish Makhmudov within 4 to 6 rounds coming off of a 2-year layoff. Now, that being said, I do think that there should be certain points of the fight that should be worrying, especially to Fury fans, especially with a potential eventual matchup against AJ going on. Makhmudov did land on Fury at certain points in time. There were rounds that Fury needed to warm up and get into the fight. And there were still a lot of big-time mistakes that Fury was making that he has made throughout his entire career. One of the major things being going straight backwards, being flat-footed, going straight back, and his opponents pushing forward and pushing massive pressure, as Makhmudov did, being able to land on him, especially early. And, Makhmudov, as much as he has been pushed as this powerful heavyweight that even at 36 years old does not have a ton of tremendous tread on his tires because of the little bit of fighting that he's done, and he's powerful and he's strong. He's still not, a big time threat within the heavyweight division. Ajit Kabayel had a little bit of trouble with him early, but ultimately was able to finish him within the first half of the fight. And you look at guys like Fabio Wardley and Moses Itama and Daniel Dubois and whatnot. Ajit Kabayel, who I just mentioned, Alexander Usyk. Heck, maybe you could even look at Anthony Joshua. I think that most of those guys, you could say, would have gotten Makhmudov out of there even with being off of a 2-year layoff. So I think that there are two sides to this. I think that there shouldn't have been this massive expectation for Fury to do that against this type of opponent. And I do think that there needs to be praise for his performance in boxing skill and the speed that he was able to keep and whatnot. But I also think that there was a more inferior opponent in this matchup, and that there could have been more shown, or you could at least say that there would have been more shown from other competitors within the heavyweight division. I think that you really have to take this from kind of a 50-50 middle point standpoint, where you have to give Fury credit, but you also do have to bring in critiques from this, from some of the weaknesses that you still saw him portray. But moving from that, the big time question from this is, how will this match up against AJ, against Anthony Joshua, and what they hope is an eventual matchup? And to me, as of right now, this is as 50-50 of a fight as it could be. This is probably the most unknown that this fight has come across over the 10 years that we have been talking about these two great Brits potentially getting in the ring with each other. And I say that because, once again, the level of the competition that these two have been in the ring with recently, there's not a big time measurement as to where we could put them on a scale here. I mean, Arslanbek Makhmudov is probably not a top 15, maybe even top 20 heavyweight, you could say, probably within, the top 25. And prior to that, Anthony Joshua, all we've really, gauged him and seen him in the ring with was a fight against Jake Paul, which I don't think is a fight that you can measure anything from. And since that Jake Paul fight, AJ has switched trainers once again, gone into Alexander Usyk's camp. AJ has been involved in a massive catastrophic car accident, which we don't know how that's going to affect him both physically and mentally, with it unfortunately killing two close friends of his that were very much involved within his camps and whatnot. So right now, both of these two on a level, I don't really know how we can really compare and contrast them. Now, I will tell you this. I do think that both of these fighters have aspects in their game that are big time mismatches for each other. Now, what do I mean by this? When it comes to Fury matching up against AJ, I do think that Fury, in some retrospects, in some aspects, is a bad matchup for AJ. AJ, throughout his career, has seemed to struggle the most with the guys who are better boxers than him, or at least equal boxers than him. You look at the fights against Usyk. You look at the fights against potentially even an Andrew Ruiz, who maybe is not a better pure boxer than AJ, but is smaller, quicker, and was a more intelligent fighter within the boxing department. You look at a guy like Klitschko, who had a very, sturdy way of fighting within his own. Those have all been fights that AJ has struggled with. In fact, the fights that AJ has not struggled with are the guys that are worse off within the boxing department. Otto Wallin, Hellenius. You look at, potentially a guy like, who else? Kubrat Pulev and whatnot. Like, the guys that are more come forward action fighters are the guys that AJ is able to put down. But when you put him against a smarter, quicker, a equal or even better boxer than him, which I think Tyson Fury is, in terms of, the way that Fury is able to think in there, the way that Fury, is able to have his herky-jerky movements combined with his feints to be able to open up openings, especially on the inside, and coming up with certain uppercuts and hooks over the top, that in itself is a very, very bad matchup for Anthony Joshua, because I think that AJ could approach this as to wanting to outbox Fury and will not be able to do that. Now, on the other side, matching up AJ against Tyson Fury, I do think that with the power that AJ brings, with the more of a boxing style that AJ does bring, in terms of Makhmudov wasn't able to do a lot against Fury just basically based off the fact that Makhmudov is a much more sturdy fighter. He doesn't have a lot of bend into his knees. He doesn't introduce a whole lot of head movement that allows him to evade shots and be able to get in on the inside. Anthony Joshua will be able to execute those aspects of his fight game. And if he is able to employ a more come forward, inside fighting style against Fury, the power that he brings, the speed that he brings, we saw it on display against Jake Paul. We saw it on display against guys like Wallen and whatnot, who I had previously mentioned, and even Daniel Dubois, who he was able not to finish, who he was able to hurt towards the end of the fight before he eventually got finished. AJ, with the power that he brings, could be a massive, massive threat to Fury, because Fury is vulnerable to get hit. He is vulnerable to be hurt. We saw him down a multitude of times within the Wilder trilogies, within the two fights against Usyk, against the fight in the fight against Francis Ngannou. So if AJ is able to land shots, if he is able to get inside, that could be a bad matchup for Tyson Fury in terms of the power that AJ is able to bring to the table and how he could hurt Fury, which is why I really see this at this moment as a real 50-50 fight. We don't really know where each boxer is in comparison to each other, but we know that each of them brings strengths to the table that are major, major weaknesses to each individual fighter. So it's a really, really interesting and obviously major, major fight that you can make right now, even with them being towards the tail end of their career in their mid to late 30s. It's still a massive fight, especially making it in Britain, in England, for this title of the King of Britain and the King of British boxing within this heavyweight modern era that we have had so far. The final thing that I want to discuss, and this is probably the biggest topic of all, is are we actually going to get this fight? Because it has been negotiated several times. Both sides have had issues coming to an agreement. There have been times where Fury has left the negotiation table and set ridiculous deadlines for AJ. There have been other moments where AJ and Eddie Hearn haven't necessarily felt like they were necessarily ready or that it was worth it to immediately jump into the ring with Fury. And we obviously got a cinematic or what was supposed to be a cinematic setup between AJ and Fury at the end of Fury's fight in the post-fight press conference, where Fury turns to AJ, calls him out, and AJ, smart on AJ's hand, because AJ at this moment, or at least in that moment, coming out of, sitting there watching Fury after Fury beats, AJ in that moment at least doesn't have a lot of leverage at the negotiation table. So if he were to walk into the ring and face off with Fury, yes, it would have been an incredible, incredible moment. And I myself wish that we could have seen that. But it would have weakened AJ so much when it comes to him as a promotional tool, because it would have been seen as Fury leading him on, leading him into the ring, Fury coming off of the win. So Fury needs to, set the table and set his demands. The way that AJ moved about it, not going into that ring and telling Fury, you have to call me, you have to come to the table, it really puts everything into AJ's terms, but it also makes it seem like if this fight doesn't happen, it's purely off of Tyson Fury, because AJ is saying he wants it. AJ is saying it's the only fight he wants. Even Fury said in the post-fight press conference that he doesn't care about Fabio Wardley or Daniel Dubois or Moses Itama. The only two fights that he would potentially come back for is the AJ fight or a trilogy with Usyk. So if this fight does not go through at this moment, Anthony Joshua put himself in a fantastic position at the end of that confrontation, so that if this fight does not go through, it is purely based on Tyson Fury being scared and not wanting it to happen. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen. I'm not saying that's what's happening currently. But to go into the ring for a fight that is not 100% signed and confirmed, that's still going through negotiations, it would have completely weakened AJ and not allowed him to have any leverage in terms of the terms to agree with. Are we going to get this fight? I can't confidently say, just because we've been in this situation so many times before. I do think that we're probably in the best position to get this fight because Fury really needs it. He really needs the AJ name to add on to his resume. It would be kind of his last big-time hurrah to walk into the sunset with. AJ doesn't necessarily need the fight, but again, it would be a nice addition to his resume. It'd be a great story for AJ to come back after the car accident. Would be a great honor for him. It could potentially push AJ into bigger time fights against guys like the winner of Wardley Dubois or some other big time matchup, maybe a fight against Moses Atama or whatnot. It would push AJ to the moon. So I think as of right now, while it is still very, very unlikely, I think it's the best chance that this fight has to be made. And if it's not made now, obviously, it's never going to be made. And we're never going to see it happen, which would be a real shame. But early predictions for me, I'm going to go with Fury by a 12-round decision. I know that AJ is probably the better athlete at this moment, but I still favor Fury within the boxing department. I believe that if AJ would come into this fight, especially with Usyk and Usyk's team on his back, they would employ a more, footwork boxing level strategy to go up against Fury. And I honestly think that with AJ's level of boxing, because that is a worse level than Usyk, that plays right into Fury's hands. But it's still a very, very close fight, and I would not be surprised if AJ would be able to chin Fury and be able to knock him out. But let me know what you think about all of that down below within the comment section. What did you think about Fury's performance on Saturday? What did you think about the confrontation between him and AJ? Do you think this fight could actually be made? And if it does, what are your first predictions, early predictions for that type of matchup? Leave all of that down below within the comment section, as well as liking this video, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You will get to see my latest reactions to breaking news within the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will never miss whenever the podcast decides to upload an episode. And without further ado, guys, that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. I hope that you guys have a great start to your week. And peace.